Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special Parent Connection workshop about the Fall 2020 plan. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you that this is a 30-minute workshop. The beginning of the workshop will be about 10 minutes of information based upon questions that the community has been asking about this specific topic. Then there will be about 20 minutes designated to a question and answer period. If you have any questions for the panelists, please use the question and answer or the Q&A tab on your screen. Please keep in mind that we may not have time to answer all your questions, but we will work hard to get as many questions as possible. And remember to visit our FAQs on vbschools.com. My name is Dr. Admin Alexander, the Director of the Office of Family and Community Engagement. I'm extremely excited to have our panelists today. Mr. Matt Delaney, the Executive Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning. Dr. Sarah Lockett, Director of Technical and Career Education. Mr. David Swanger, the Director of Technical and Career Education Center, and Mr. Mike Taylor, Director of Advanced Technology Center. They are here and joining us today to talk about the Technical and Career Centers. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We hope that this information answers questions that you may have and provides you with additional resources to help you during this time. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Delaney. Thank you, Mr. Delaney.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. I appreciate it. And welcome to all of you that are joining us this evening to talk about our Technical and Career Centers. I'm proud to be here with Dr. Lockett and Mr. Taylor and Mr. Swanger. We know this is a very anxious time for our families and our students who are committed to these fabulous programs we have at the Advanced Technology Center and at the Technical and Career Education Center. And you're looking forward to making a very difficult decision and hoping you can receive some information around what that will look like for your students at those centers. Prior to getting into answering some of those questions, I just want to go back and share a little bit of some of the things that we want to make sure you're aware of. Obviously, you are looking to make a decision on whether or not you want to choose option one, which is face-to-face learning when social distancing and safety measures are in place, and as you know, we're starting the year temporarily in a virtual learning environment, or option two, which is 100% virtual learning. And certainly you're wondering probably if I choose option two, what does that mean for us at the centers? And those are conversations that Dr. Lockett and Mr. Taylor and Mr. Swanger hope to answer for you tonight. But we have a significant commitment to ensuring that students receive the best instruction in these two programs that they can provide. We know the value of these programs from a graduate profile standpoint, as well as from an industry certification standpoint. We also know it from a dual enrollment standpoint. So there's several of those areas that we know impact your decision making around these two options. We just want to make sure we're clear around what is going to be the difference between the emergency learning plan in the spring and where we're moving into the fall 2020 instruction. You know, as the term emergency says, we were in a state of emergency. We're in a period of unknown. We were asked to leave buildings one day and we did not come back until hopefully sometime soon. And in those situations, we were responding as best as we could. We've had some opportunities now to plan. We're still working hard in that planning standpoint. We are still dealing with a lot of the unknowns, but we look to add a more rigorous curriculum instruction and assessment, look to see how we can remediate and accelerate students in their programs, as well as one of the biggest components is provide synchronous live instruction for those students in a virtual world. Students are going to be graded, they're going to receive feedback, and their attendance is going to be monitored. The biggest challenge we have with the centers is what does synchronous live instruction look like in these unique hands-on programs? And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lockett now and allow her, and we'll begin to take questions from Mr. Taylor and Mr. Swanger. Dr. Lockett?
Thank you, Mr. Delaney. I want to start out by just talking about career and technical electives across the board. I'm seeing a lot of questions from families about what options will my student have in the fall. And I really want to assure our school community that there is going to be a full range of career and technical electives, whether that is for your middle school student at their home school, your high school student at their home school, a student that chooses option two in the virtual learning center, or a student who is attending one of our career and technical centers, whether it's the Tech Center or the ATC. So we really appreciate you all coming out to hear about these options tonight, and I know there are a lot of questions Our staff has been hard at work planning new projects and opportunities that will address some of those concerns with hands-on learning, and we really hope to share a little bit more about that with you tonight. But I'd like to jump right in, and one of the first questions I think I heard you mention, Mr. Delaney, is a parent that wants to know, my child was accepted into a program at the Tech Center. Will he or she still be able to access that program? And Mr. Swanger, you want to take that question?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Lockett, and thank you, parents and students, for joining. And the answer to that question is absolutely. Our programs will be offered to students.
Now, Dr. Swanger, as a follow-up to this, and I know this is a concern that you and Mr. Taylor have shared often with leadership and others. What about hands-on instruction, which is so important for learning a trade and being marketable to a potential first-time employer? What will that look like, in your opinion? How will we provide that opportunity of the hands-on instruction?
Well, you know, that's a great question, Mr. Delaney, and the majority of our programs lend themselves to the need of that practical or hands-on piece. And due to the nature of our tools, specialized tools and equipment and materials, and the processes involved, hands-on practice is going to be needed for the majority of our Tech Center programs.
And just to kind of circle back real quick with our Advanced Technology Center students, because I know the parents there are wondering as well. Mr. Taylor, can you share what those programs will look like at the ATC this fall? Mr. Taylor, you're muted.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Like the home high schools, the Tech Center and the ATC will offer a full slate of programs. Students accepted or returning to the ATC should plan to take those advanced technical courses and may select option 1 or option 2.
Dr. Lockett, a question I've seen pop up several times just as I'm reviewing some of the Q&A is if you can maybe discuss a little bit the 4x4 schedule's impact on both ATC or the TCE.
Sure. For our electives at the high school and the middle school, the home schools, students will be receiving daily instruction with that more condensed time frame that is the hallmark of the 4x4. For our career and technical centers, students are already double blocked and coming every day. So they won't see any change in their schedule as far as the number of meetings and the fact that they come every day. Mr. Swanger, Mr. Taylor, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, the only difference they might see is grading more often than they would normally see it in the past because of the 4x4 and the increased number of grading periods.
Yeah, and our students, our courses will remain year-long, and students will be assessed all year long, and they'll receive their credits at the conclusion of the school year for our programs.
So Dr. Lockett, if I could just provide a little additional clarity to the 4x4 schedule just for the families that may be listening. Traditionally, we are on an AB block schedule, which means typically a student would take anywhere from 6 to 8 classes, 3 to 4 one day, 3 to 4 the next day. When I say one day would be an A day and the other day would be a B day. On the 4x4 schedule, it was brought into the secondary level this year for a couple of reasons. One was safety and health mitigation factors. One of the things, as Dr. Spence has shared with advice from our medical professionals, is try to reduce the amount of interaction students are having, essentially saying cohort students. Well, that's very difficult to do on the secondary level, so one of the things you can try to do is minimize the number of classes they're transitioning to each day, and the 4x4 allows that to happen where a student will be taking anywhere from 3 to 4 classes per day, every day. Now, to Mr. Taylor and Mr. Swanger and what Dr. Lockett said, essentially, the centers have been operating as a 4x4 schedule all the time because students come every day and they're double blocked, and that will not change. So the level of how they are received or attend the centers is not any different. It's only going to be different for the students when they attend their core classes at their home school, which again would be anywhere, typically 1 or 2 classes every day.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney. One of the questions I'd like to circle back to was around, what does that instruction look like? There's a lot of hands-on activities both at our home schools and our career and technical electives, but even more so when we talk about the Advanced Technology Center and the Tech Center. And some of those circle around advanced computer software programs that students are using, and they will be, still working from their Chromebooks and without access to the labs. We're getting a lot of questions from parents about how that will happen. And the thought here is that those programs will be virtualized to run through their Chromebooks, so students will still have access to those computer labs that will prepare their students for credential testing and for real world experiences, internships, jobs after high school. And this is true across the board for career and technical electives. In addition, we are looking at some simulations, and this really is course by course, depending on what the needs are for the course and where there are quality materials out there, along with all the great lessons and activities that our teachers are coming up with. And they've been super creative as they're working all summer, putting these things together. But I also wanted to ask Mr. Swanger and Mr. Taylor if you had anything you'd like to add about how we're going to address hands-on learning as we stay home, at least in the first part of the year.
I'd be glad to respond to that. Just like every other class or program, we're going to start off virtually or remotely. And teachers are going to provide both the synchronous and asynchronous instruction. All of our programs have both a theoretical and the practical or hands-on aspects, with the heaviest emphasis being placed on hands-on instruction. As we begin the school year, teaching and learning will occur as if we started school normally, with the only exception being we're doing it remotely. We're going to take attendance. We're going to introduce new material. We're going to provide students with as many opportunities to do hands-on experiences in a remote setting. There are some options available there, but the key is when it's safe to return to school, our students will need to return to us, and so we can heavily emphasize that practical or hands-on piece because the theory is we're going to hit the theory up front as much as we can, but as I mentioned before, with the unique nature of our programs and the specialized equipment, materials, and processes involved, it's really going to require students to have time to practice. We do have two programs that are licensed programs. Students sit for state licensure, and we have, there are requirements for the practical or hands-on piece for both of those in order to meet state licensure requirements.
Thank you. And Mike, what about the classes at the ATC?
Well, the ATC, we're going to be prepared to provide access to students to many of the specialized advanced technologies, softwares, and so forth that we use every day, like the Autodesk, AutoCAD products, things like Adobe, the Adobe Suite, things like the Cisco Academy, that curriculum. So those curriculum accesses are going to be available to students from home, just as they would be at the school. Now, again, as Mr. Swanger said, there are going to be some face-to-face activities where we allow students to work in a very practical, hands-on manner, which it's going to be very important for those students to be able to return to us when this division moves back to face-to-face. And that kind of leads into a question that I saw in the chat of can we be virtual at home school and face-to-face at the ATC or at the ATC? And the answer to that is yes. Students who choose option 2 will be able to return to the ATC face-to-face if and when the division moves back to face-to-face instruction. We are strongly encouraging those students to do that because, again, it is essential for them to be here to get those practical hands-on experiences in addition to the curriculum that we can present in a remote or virtual fashion.
So I think we have a lot of questions around whether students coming to the centers, as families are trying to make a decision of should they choose option 1 or should they choose option 2. And I think we need to probably discuss that a little bit separately for the 2 centers, because we have families that we know will choose option 2 and want to choose that both for the center and for their homeschool. And we do have families that will fall into that category that you just described, where they are comfortable sending a student back to the smaller population at the center, but still would like to remain virtual for their core classes. So knowing that families can choose option 2 in many instances for the centers, Mike, can you tell us a little bit about choosing option 2 at the ATC?
Yes, if the students decide to remain virtual and still attend the ATC through that first semester or first term, then they will participate in ATC classes in a synchronous fashion using distance learning technology, so that they will actually take part in many of the same lessons that our face-to-face students will be taking part in. But again, there may be some hands-on learning activities that those face-to-face students would be able to participate in that any student remaining in a virtual or distance learning format would not be able to have access to.
So they would be observers then of those activities. Now, David, when we think about the Tech Center, I know you have some programs that support option 2, and then you have some programs where that might be a little bit more difficult due to state licensure guidelines for students looking for licensure or the nature of the course. Can you share with us a little bit about the Tech Center's plans for students choosing option 1 or option 2?
Absolutely. It's important to know that while we are in that remote setting, that there are going to be many practical activities that can only be completed during an actual hands-on practice. But we're going to cover, like I said before, we're going to cover as much theory as possible in remote learning, and where appropriate, provide the simulated practical experiences. And when it's safe to return for in-person learning, we're going to emphasize the hands-on practice at that time. Now, if a student and parents selected option 2, it's critical that when deemed safe to return, the option 2 students return to the Tech Center for the hands-on practice. These students would still be allowed to remain in the VLC for their homeschool classes, but there would need to be some in-person learning for Tech Center courses. We do have 6 of our courses that lend themselves to totally a virtual realm, and those are Pharmacy Tech, Public Safety, TV Communications and Production, Legal Systems Administration, Medical Systems Administration, and Early Childhood Education. The remainder of our programs are just require, that hands-on piece. And I can give a very simple example of laying bricks. I mean, it's difficult to lay bricks in a remote setting. When a student is learning how to select an appropriate tool to work on an automobile, knowing how to actually use that tool, and following whatever specific guidelines are provided in a repair manual, all of that has to be done under the guidance of an industry professional, and they need that practice. And it's unfortunate, but that's just the nature of our programs. So barring those 6 programs that I just mentioned, if students and parents have chosen option 2, it's really important that when it is safe to return, that those option 2 students return to us for hands-on and remain virtual for their homeschool courses. Now, I will say, if there are students and parents that simply just do not want their child to return to in-person learning, and they're not in the aforementioned 6 programs, then they may need to seek counsel from one of their homeschool counselors or someone to find another program or other course that may meet their needs.
Thank you, David. And I know that your school counselor and your staff is happy to help them with those choices as well. And really talk over with families. You know, I know this is a hard decision when it comes to some of those hands-on programs. And it was a tough decision for us. So we really encourage families that are struggling with that to reach out to their school counselor or to the tech center to talk about programs and options for some of those that do require face-to-face. I have seen a couple questions in the chat, some asking clarification on the hands-on learning, and a couple also asking about industry certification. So I think I'll start with the industry certification. The question is, will my son or daughter still be able to sit for the industry credential exams that have been such a hallmark of these Virginia Beach programs? And the answer to that is yes. In some cases, those exams can be given virtually. In other cases, we've had some great success this summer with bringing students in small cohorts, both to the ATC and to the Tech Center to sit for exams. And the plan is to continue that. And this week, I know we're doing, I think, several hundred WISE tests for students. So that is something that we plan to continue and are feeling very encouraged about. And that holds true for our industry credentials as well. Some other pieces of the hands-on that parents are asking about are things like internships. A lot of our classes, both at the home high schools through co-op and cooperative office education, have work experience or internships. Our Virginia Teachers for Tomorrow students often do classroom internships. And we've been asked how those will be handled. So I would like to share with parents who are concerned about their students having these real world experiences that we're holding out hope that those will still be able to happen. And a lot of those courses that require those are being moved to the spring term, or which is basically our second semester, in hopes that as soon as we are able, we can return students to those real world experiences. And I know that holds true for the ATC and the Tech Center as well.
Dr. Lockett?
Yes, sir.
I see several questions around transportation. Getting to the ATC, getting to the Technical Career Education Center. There was a question that I saw that talked about if we're in yellow, will those students return? And it may be good for the community here, kind of the challenges we have with transportation and what the expectations are in terms of what we typically do to transport students to those schools and centers, and what we have to look forward to moving into the fall.
Sure, and we've had ongoing conversations with transportation, and we've been thinking outside the box on how that will happen, because we know a lot of our students depend on transportation to those programs. And it's definitely a tough one. As a parent who's had a student in one of the centers, I can tell you that my own children rode the bus from their home high school to the ATC in the morning, and then midday rode that bus back. As we are doing social distancing and sticking to those lower numbers on a bus, especially in yellow, it's going to be a little tough, but we are committed to making that work for our families. And whether that's in yellow or in green, I think we'll see as we move forward with how many students are looking for face-to-face. And we're going to have to keep you posted on that. And I don't know, Mr. Delaney, if you want to expound on that a little bit more.
I think you've addressed it in terms of some of the limitations that we have in terms of the numbers of students that can be on a bus. I know our operations team and our transportation division is looking to ensure, for example, if we're yellow and ninth graders are coming back, how do we transport them to different academies and so forth. I think really the key is just where are we with our health mitigation, and what are the numbers of students that need to be transported to those centers will have an impact. I know we are discussing a lot of alternative ways to do that, and I know we're looking at a lot of solutions to ensure that can happen, because we certainly do not want a lack of transportation to be a reason for a student not to be able to attend one of our programs. And I just think it's important for them to understand that typically students that do not drive themselves to the centers catch a bus at their home school at some point during the day. And for those, as Mr. Taylor talked about, the opportunity to choose option 2 for their homeschool and option 1 to go to the tech centers, that there will be some things we'll need to work out from what that looks like from a transportation and how they would report to the school, how we'd safely get them on the bus, and kind of alleviate some of the concerns a parent may have in that scenario. So I think it's just important for them to know that we're working on that piece and trying to make sure that I'm certain there's some families that are wondering, will my child be able to still receive transportation to the center?
Sure,
Thank
definitely.
you, Dr. Lockett.
And I think it would be helpful too for our families to know if you could reach out to the counselor at the center or one of our directors and make sure that that we're aware. If you have chosen option 2, but you plan to avail yourself of option 1 just for the center, it's good for us to make sure that we know that your student will be there. And I'm sure that the center staff is also going to be checking in on, number of students who believe, they need transportation. So I'm sure you'll be hearing from center staff as we get closer to that date.
Dr. Lockett, I think it's extremely important for them to work with Mr. Swanger and Mr. Taylor and let them know that they're leaning in that direction, and to continue to get the guidance from both of them. I hate to speak for them, but they're extremely committed to their programs. They've been invested into those centers for many years, and I think they will do whatever it takes to ensure that kids are getting that just vital technical education that we're fortunate to provide for them. So if you're in that position as a family where that's the decision you plan on making, then I certainly believe you would want to reach out directly to Mr. Swanger and Mr. Taylor. I'm sure they'll be checking on it as well, but from an efficiency standpoint, it'll be helpful as you contact them moving forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Swanger, and Mr. Taylor, I see some questions that are being asked that appears that people are looking to get information on the tech centers in general. How do they apply? Where can they get more information? I'm seeing a few of those questions. So I believe we have an audience here that is also just interested in what's out there. Where would you point them to go to get that level of information?
Well, first, anyone can visit our website. Our application is online. We have a nice video that clearly explains or showcases all of our programs. They can contact myself, our school counselor, at any time, and our contact information is on our website, and it's readily available. We still have some space in certain programs. If I could, Mr. Delaney, if I could just for 1 minute, because I saw numerous questions in the chat still pertaining to people being unclear about the hands-on piece. Can I just mention something else briefly?
Sure.
Just to be clear, that students will remain in the virtual realm until it has been deemed safe by the division and all of its medical professionals. And once students start to transition back based on our opening of school plan, students will then, based on that transition, and when they're allowed to return to the center for that hands-on piece, that's when we will heavily emphasize that practical experience and get a lot of hands-on practice immediately upon their return. So I think that should clarify some of those other questions, and I may not have been clear when I answered that.
I think, Mr. Swanger, I think you clarified it. I think what people are concerned is how quick will that happen? What will it look like? And I think that they just will gain a deeper understanding if they reach out to you about how flexible you all will be with what that looks like when they return. As I know, the school division is not going to rush into a face-to-face return without really planning out what that's going to look like for all of our programs. And I know, Dr. Alexander, it's almost time to wrap up, but for those individuals that are looking for more information on those centers, you can go to our VB Schools website under academic programs, and you will see the Technical and Career Education Center and the Advanced Technology Center included in that lineup of selections that you can get more information. But families of students that are currently enrolled at those two centers, highly recommend that you connect with Mr. Swanger and Mr. Taylor as we continue the choice process over the next couple of days. Dr. Alexander, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney, and thank you to all the panelists. And special thank to our Virginia Beach City Public Schools community for watching this session and watching all three sessions. and asking these great questions. We hope that this helps you as you continue to guide you through to the fall 2020 school year. And remember to view our FAQs on vbschools.com. And also, all 3 sessions are going to be recorded, so please view them as well at your leisure at vbschools.com also. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please join us on Thursday for our second VB Safe Together community chat with Dr. Lakeisha Parrott, discussing the global issues of homelessness and how our city and school division continues to address the needs of citizens without adequate housing and resources, as well as the Project Hope program. Once again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight for the Special Parent Connection series. Thank you to our panelists, and have a great night. Be safe.